Last night, Clean, Tweak, and Donut Operator, accompanied with two representatives from Void Interactive, gave us, finally, a full ideal reveal of what can be expected from Void Interactive's soon-to-be-released Ready or Not. Now, the game itself might be about a year away from complete development, according to the timeline of the developer, but we were able to at least see some fantastic gameplay footage and get an idea of what to expect from the game. Hi everybody, my name is Onepeg MG, and this is the news. Now this is going to be a little bit of a special edition. We're not going to talk about Tarkov for this video, although I will be uploading 2 additional videos inside of the next day or so that have to deal, one with bugs and other information changes that have now happened to Tarkov with a hotfix that was released today, as well as another video that I want to make that has to do with the now completed developer ARG and the community developed ARG that is still ongoing. But anyway, back to Ready or Not. So last night there was a podcast that delved into what Ready or Not is. And this is a highly anticipated game, both from myself and from a wide variety of shooter simulator, realism, tactical type games. Now, Void Interactive, an independent developer, is hearkening back to a lot of familiarity with police raid-related and SWAT-style video games, specifically that of SWAT 4. In this case, you play the part of a SWAT operative, both in the sense of a single-player, linearly driven, story-driven campaign, although they did say that there is going to be some randomization associated with the game itself and what we could expect from it in terms of how the puzzles of each map are going to actually be laid out, and there will be some variance from mission to mission. But in addition to that, they also said that there's going to be really immersive PvE multiplayer experience and a very involved PvP style experience, hopefully being able to cater to both sides of that coin, be it PvP players that like that feeling of dominance over an opponent with a wide variety of different game modes, or people that like to have that progressive achievement style of system where they're able to work through a linear style of story. Myself personally, I like both sides, which is why I've been so enthralled with wanting to play a game like Tarkov, because I get both of those senses at the same time. Now, in the case of a game like Ready or Not, it's kind of going to be an either or. We're not going to see people playing the role of the villain or the criminal element during any of these story-driven scenarios, because that would kind of kill the point of it being a puzzle. Now, I'm going to have footage from the trailer running in the background for this, but I will not really be pumping the audio from it. I obviously don't want to be taking away credit or IP or, infringing on copyright, for instance, for the game developer, and I really would like them to be able to get the views that they deserve. So, if you'd like to check out the intricacies of the trailer and get the voiceover and all of that fun stuff, I would encourage you to go and check out Ready or Not's trailer at the link that I'll provide in the comments section as well as the description. So in the game of Ready or Not, you act as a SWAT team member, where you infiltrate and neutralize criminal elements through scenarios with a focus on tactics, realism, and really rewarding attempts at non-lethal solutions to extremely tense, randomized, and partially procedurally generated situations or levels. This, also combined with several PvP modes and maps, attempts to satisfy both the PvP and PvE player bases. Now, included in this will be several different factions. There will be organizations such as one that is close or harkens back to the IRA, police negotiators, local police department officers. The FBI will be a larger faction involved in this, where you actually take on a joint raid, for instance, as well as EMS and fire responders. Now, in my personal opinion, the podcast itself was done extremely, extremely well. It seemed to be well put together, well thought out. There were very good questions being asked by both the community and the prepared questions by the people on the panel. And it seemed as though the devs were genuinely looking to make a game that the player base really wanted to see. And in this case, although a guy like Donut Operator tends to be very, very funny, with his tactical related experience in the real world and Void's desire to want to make a game that is as close to realistic as they possibly can, with it still being a game, there was a lot of interesting feedback that was given from the panel toward how this game should be shaped if they really wanted to make it realistic. And what I found to be refreshing in this case was that the developers that were there from Void seemed to be incredibly receptive to those ideas and really wanted to make a game that we all would be able to say, wow, this really feels like I'm on a SWAT team, albeit virtually. Now, in the course of this podcast, there was also the mention of Carcosa, which for most people in recent memory would harken back to the first season of the series of True Detective. But it's actually a fictional city in a story by Ambrose Bierce, which is titled An Inhabitant of Carcosa. Essentially, it is an ancient city that is set to be almost mythical. There were some hints or teasers in the trailer that have to do with that. But if we're going with the True Detective style of canon for this, the idea of Carcosa is one in which people go to disappear. It's almost fearfully revered. And while I haven't had enough time to look through the trailer myself to find hints and teasers associated with Carcosa, I'm definitely going to take a closer look at this, and along with some other folks that I know are super into ARG style of puzzles like this one, it would be interesting to see how this whole thing pans out, either through a prevailing story arc or a macro level arc or an ARG in the purest sense. Now, just some highlights from the actual game itself. There was talk of a campaign, which we know about, that is going to have a linear storyline. There's going to be a general experience system where you'll be able to level up your character, and the levels themselves are said to be something that is going to vary from gameplay to gameplay. There is no one way to solve any one of these actual missions, although there was talk of how it would be more experience, more points, and more beneficial to your player to level faster by doing non-lethal takedowns of these criminal elements. If you're able to clear a level by not having killed anyone and, disable them with beanbags, flashbang grenades, tear gas, that kind of thing, stingers, then and handcuff them and bring them in, then you'll actually get like the SS tier completion rating, as opposed to one where you end up having to use lethal means. Now, what I found to be interesting about this is that there's going to be a hideout or station where people can compete in like mini games against each other that have to do with run and gun courses or like a kill house leaderboard, where in order to complete the course you have to do it in a certain amount of time. And I think that that's very, very cool to be able to not only practice your abilities but also be able to compete in time trials against other players and try and get higher on that leaderboard. Very, very cool stuff. There was a question asked by Donut regarding the campaign itself, where he posited the question if there was going to be like SWAT team roles, for instance. For a perfect example, as an example, on every SWAT team, there is a designated medic. In this case, the devs of Ready or Not said that there's not going to be a medical system. There's no healing involved in these missions. If you get hurt, you stay hurt for the duration of the mission. If you get immobilized, you're immobilized. If you get killed, you've been killed. Throughout the course of these missions, the idea is to not get shot, obviously. Again, trying to harken back to a sense of realism. But in the case of there being a medic mechanic, they said that they wanted to keep the pace to be something that was going to be more intense and faster, and by having a medical system where you could heal up and essentially continue on with the mission, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. They said it tended to just kind of slow everything down, so they're not going to do that. And to me, that makes sense. If you're trying to go for a realistic feel and you get shot in the middle of your thigh, you're probably not going to continue. You know, you break a bone, you're going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. You're not going to wrap a bandage around your arm and go back to work, right? Now, in terms of features for this game, they talked of every player having a helmet cam, use of hand signals, multi-tools for picking locks, explosive devices, breaching shotguns, other deployables like tactical ladders, drones, gas grenade launchers, stingers as an option, hand-thrown grenades, flashbangs, etc. Now, all of these are going to be unlockable via an in-game point system. Now, all of these are supposed to be unlockable via an in-game point system. And in regard to solo play, the game is going to have a very, very heavy, in-depth emphasis on team-based play. So as a solo player or duo player combination, as a solo player or a duo, the idea is that you'll be able to go into a game and join up with some other random players to complete a mission. Now, obviously, in order to be able to get a higher score or really get that tactical advantage, you're probably going to want to go in with a full pre-made team. But for those of us that don't have the ability to always do that, it's nice to know that there is going to be some form of built-in inherent matchmaking, especially in the case of maps like this, where you need to make sure that you're all able to work together. Now, there was talk of some meme-level kill effects, where you have the ability to try and kill someone with a battering ram, for instance. And they said that when it happens, it's actually really funny because when you hit them and actually get the kill, their body goes flying, like to outer space flying, which I thought was pretty funny. And there's also kind of like this gun game mode where you get these cinematic effects of crazy kills or takedowns that Void is also looking to incorporate in the game. Kind of like tall tale highlight reel stuff, which I think is pretty cool. Now, in terms of a progression system, they said that there was going to be two main facets of this. One is in the single-player option for the game, you're going to get some kind of progressive leveling system where you use your points to unlock new attachments for weapons or tactical items, things like that, to enable you different avenues by which to try and tackle certain challenges. This kind of reminds me of all of the different ways that you could beat a level in games like Hitman, where in one playthrough of a map, you could take out your target with fish. And in another instance, you could drop a scaffolding on their head. And in another instance, you could poison them with food. All still leading up to the inevitable conclusion that you win. But there's a wide variety of different ways. One of the things that I love about games like this is that you could have the same level design, and just by shuffling the deck up a little bit, create a completely new and interactive experience for the player. That allows for replayability of your game. And from a developer perspective, it actually elongates the amount of time that you would need to be able to make a new release or a DLC or an addition to your game to make the game replayable for a longer period of time. I think games like Hitman and games like this, if it works out, are kind of brilliant in that effect, where you could have the same scenery but modify the scenario and allow somebody the ability to get many, many more hours of enjoyable gameplay out of it. Really, really well done. Good idea. Now, there was talk of the multiplayer progression system. Like, how do we unlock things? Now, in the Call of Duty sense, which is the thing most commonly referred to when it comes to multiplayer experiences and skin unlocks, things like getting 50 headshots with an SMG to unlock the gold skin for a weapon, or getting all of the achievements for all of the weapons in order to be able to get a diamond skin, things like that, start getting to be incredibly grindy. So in this case, they said that they didn't want to do something like what Call of Duty uses as their multiplayer progression system. Instead, what they wanted to do was have it based on actions. For instance, if you're using a beanbag shotgun and the idea is to disable your target, the idea is to disable them and get an arrest by using the shotgun, not get a bunch of headshots with the shotgun using a beanbag and then you get a skin. But in this case, you'd be able to earn points from that, which would allow you to unlock attachments or skins, depending on what it is that your flavor is. And in terms of skins, they also said there's not going to be like any pink guns or any gold shiny guns or anything with lightning effects or something crazy. It's going to be SWAT team appropriate. So I would expect to see stuff like, you know, digital camo or snow camo or city camo, lots of different camo. Black, tan, that kind of stuff. I would expect not to see anything that's going to be crazily flashy because it just wouldn't fit, Now, lastly, there was a lot of conversation about the AI. In this case, they wanted to make sure that the AI was going to react realistically. And there was even talk of mechanics for certain things like tasers, which there are lots of videos of people not being really affected by tasers or pepper spray or something like that. And while Void currently said that for their tasers, for instance, that everyone would be affected by the taser every single time, they did say that there is consideration being given to things like thickness of clothing and age of the target, as well as whether or not the target is being influenced by drugs or alcohol or something like that, where they may not necessarily react to the taser's deployment. In the case of something like a taser, we all know that there are people that are much more resistant to those electrical shocks and have the ability to kind of fight through that. So it would be interesting to see if people are able to fight through the taser, or in the case of if you're tasing an elderly person, or if they have a pacemaker and tasing them kills them, then having that little surprise built in, I think would also add another element to make people really question, second guess, and take into consideration what it is that they're doing and who it is that they're talking to. In addition to this, they said that in the case of this AI, that it's going to be diverse. Some people will be cooperative. Some people will be combative. Some people will feign cooperativeness and become combative. Some people will have hidden extra weapons on them, for instance, where they'll drop their primary gun, but then have another one in their back that they suddenly decide to pull on you. And they also said that the AI will have some type of realistic reaction to the damage that they take. If you screw up your aim and end up shooting them in the leg, then they end up having a limp. If you shoot them in the arm, they're going to have problems raising their weapon. I think the idea ultimately is that they're going to have as much realism built into the game as they possibly can. And I think that that is super, super, super cool. The other thing that they said was that all of the animations that are being done in the game were all taken via motion capture. And most mocaps are taken at, somewhere around 60 to 100 frames per second. In this case, Void decided that they were going to go with 240 frames per second of animation. So that way they're really capturing every single one of these minute motions. Now, for someone on the consumer side, when you hear something like 240 frames a second, that's awesome. That's the kind of stuff that you go, wow, they're really going above and beyond. And for an individual consumer, and I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, when I see developers really putting in the extra effort, really going the extra mile and creating some new IP, like what this appears to be, it's super, super cool to see some fresh thinking and people that genuinely have some type of a passion toward what it is that they're trying to accomplish with this. Now, I'm going to dive into the intricacies of this in a later video because I really want to take some time to really evaluate everything and come to you guys with some solid impressions and some takeaways that I think would hopefully be beneficial. But once we get to that point, we'll get to that point. That's all I have for today, guys, and so far as the Ready or Not stuff. Thank you guys so much for taking the time that you spent with me today. I cannot thank you enough for lending me your eyeballs and for hanging out with me on the streams and everything else. The community is growing every day at a crazy breakneck pace. I am like 3 weeks away from being able to call this my full-time job, and it's really cool. Thank you guys so very much. I'll see you on stream today. It's going to be a super, super long one. Probably going at least 10 to 12 hours. Super long for me. But we're going to be on for a good long while today. And I'll see you there, okay? If I don't see you on the stream, then I will see you here for the next video, which will likely be later on this afternoon or tomorrow. And we'll see you then, okay? Thanks.